Chapter 5, Section 3, Part 2, we're continuing factoring, but today we're going to learn a new type of factoring. So I already know factoring by grouping is your guys' favorite type of factoring because this is the way that Mathway does it. So you guys are all professionals at this already. So to factor by grouping, we just take the first two numbers, put them in a pair, the second two terms, put them in a pair, and then we take out what's in common in our first pair. So in our first pair here, we would have A in common. That goes on the outside. In our second pair, we would have B in common. That goes on the outside. It's super important here that we get what's inside the parentheses to be the same. So here we have x plus y. Here we need x plus y. Then we take the outsides, put them in their parentheses together, and then the insides just get merged into one. So this will make more sense when we do it in examples, but this is just a little brief explanation of factoring by grouping. So we're just going to practice this today. So
I don't get what you just did, Miss Carter.
We're going to practice it in examples, so you'll see it. So the more, this is just totally different than what we've been doing before, so the more you get to practice, the more you do it, the more it'll make sense. So we'll look at it in an example where we actually have numbers. But to factor by grouping, you will always need 4 terms. So you do this when you have 4 terms. So let's look at our first example. So we just take our first 2 terms, put them in a group, and our second 2 terms, and put them in a group. Do we have anything in common in our first 2 terms in this first group here? How many x's? 2. So we have 3 x's here, and we have 2 x's here. So we can take out 2 x's. If we have 3 and we took 2 away, how many are we left with? So we're just dividing each term here by x squared. I'll show you a little example over here. So if we have 3 x's on top, x cubed is the same thing as saying x times x times x. We're dividing it by 2 x's. So 2 of them get canceled out and we're just left with 1x.
So what do you do with that 1x?
Just rewrite it here.
And why would you put 2x outside?
Because we're taking it out.
So
what you take out, you put outside.
Uh-huh.
Left, and you put inside.
What you take out, you put on the outside. What you're left with stays on the inside.
So the number would be 3, or
So we have x squared, and we take away 2 of the x's. So are we left with any x's here?
no,
No. So what are we just left with? 3.
do we keep the plus sign in the middle?
Yes, keep the plus sign in the middle.
Is it always gonna be divided by 2?
Not always. So let's look at our second group. Is there anything in common between 4x and 12 that we can take out? 4. Awesome. So we're dividing both of these numbers by 4. We're taking out a 4, so 4 goes on the outside. What are we left with on the inside? X. And then what's 12 divided by 4? 3. So our goal was to get the inside parentheses to be the same thing. So they're the same thing. So that's step 1. We always got to make sure that these are the same. And then we want to take the outside, so whatever we took on the outside, and put it in its own parenthesis together. So here we have x squared plus 4. Can you guys see that? X squared plus 4. So we just took what's on the outside, put it in the parentheses together, and then we keep only one of what's on the inside, so x plus 3. So we just merge it into one thing.
And that's the answer.
And that's the answer.
How do you know you just pick any one?
So you just rewrite what you took out. So we took out an x squared and a 4, so that's what goes here. So it all depends on what we take out.
No, but what if the top was x squared and then x plus 3 and then it was plus 4
like for this one, for our second pair here, let me change the color so we can see. For our second group here, we could say that 2 is in common between these two numbers. We could take out a 2 from each of them. That would work. But then we would be left with 2x plus 6, which isn't the same. So we would know that we have to take something different out because we need these two to be the same.
Okay.
So if you get something that's not the same, you may have to take something different out to start. All right, let's look at our next example. We have our first group here and our second group here. So you always just group the first two terms together, group the second two terms together. What is in common in our first two terms that we can take out? X squared. What are we left with when we take out an x squared?
X
X. What's next?
plus 2.
Plus 2. Perfect. So since we have 3 x's here, we took 2 of them away. We're just left with 1x. And then x squared and x squared cancel, so plus 2. So that's our first set. What can we take out in our second group? 5. What are we left with when we divide both of these by 5?
X plus 2.
X plus 2. So are inside parts the same? Yep, x plus 2, x plus 2. So we know we took out the right numbers. So now we just take the outsides, put them in their own group. So x squared plus 5. And then the insides go into 1, x plus 2. And that's our answer.
How do you know what to put outside of parentheses?
You always, whatever you can take out, your greatest common factor in here is what goes on the outside. And your greatest common factor in here is what goes on the outside. All right. What do you think we have to do first here? What makes this one a little bit different? Awesome. Subtract 20 on both sides. So just like factoring before, we need this to be equal to 0. So we have x cubed plus 4x squared minus 5x minus 20 is equal to 0. And we always want this to be in standard form too when we're factoring by grouping. So we group our first two terms, and then we group our second two terms. What do I have in common in my first two terms that I could take out? X squared. What am I left with when I divide out an x squared? Awesome. X plus 4. Everybody with me so far? What can I take out of the second two terms? Negative 5. What am I left with when I take out a negative 5? Awesome. X plus 4. So I'm dividing both of these by negative 5. Negative 20 divided by negative 5 is what gives me that plus 4. So are my insides the same? Yep. So what do I do next?
What? Yeah, I agree.
In English? X squared minus 5. And then what goes in my second parentheses? X plus 4. Awesome. What do we have to do first here?
Subtract 2.
Subtract 2. So since it's a positive 2, we have to subtract 2. So we have x cubed plus x squared minus 2x minus 2 is equal to 0. What should we do next? Group the first two terms, group the second two terms. What can I take out of my first group? Just x? X squared. And what am I left with? So if I take out an x squared and I want to distribute this back in, I would just have x cubed. I'm missing that x squared part of it. So Segi, what do I have to put with it? Plus 1.
So where'd you get the 1?
So the 1, because I'm dividing both of these by x squared. What's x squared divided by x squared? What's the same thing divided by itself?
Oh,
That's where the 1 comes from. Because if you had like 5 divided by 5, that's just 1. So you need that 1 there. Because if I distribute this back out now, I end up with x cubed plus x squared, which is what I want.
that makes sense.
Good. I'm glad it makes sense. Everybody sees what we did there? Okay. What can I take out of my second group?
-2.
Awesome. -2. So I'm dividing both of these by -2. What am I left with when I take out a -2?
X plus 1.
X plus 1. Perfect. So are my insides the same? So I know I took out the right numbers. So what do I do with what's on the outside? X squared minus 2. And then x plus 1. This is our answer.
Gives nothing else.
No,